trillion monstrosity of a spending bill that was able to pass in the Senate thanks to budget reconciliation, which essentially means that Democrats
Bribery.
only needed 50 senators to vote for it. So thanks, Georgia, you morons. And the Democrats put out propaganda touting the benefits of spending hundreds of billions of dollars. But notice what this graphic is missing. A bullet point that says inflation reduction. And that's because the Inflation Reduction Act isn't actually designed to lower inflation. I know you're shocked. In a letter to Senator Lindsey Graham, the Congressional Budget Office answered the following question. How would enacting the bill affect inflation in 2022 and 2023? In calendar year 2022, enacting the bill would have a negligible effect on inflation in the CBO's assessment. And for clarity, negligible means so small or unimportant as to not be worth considering, or insignificant. In calendar year 2023, inflation would probably be between 0.1 percentage point lower and 0.1 percentage point higher under the bill than it would be under current law. So a spending bill called the Inflation Reduction Act is only going to maybe lower inflation by 0.1% for the entire year of 2023. And no one is buying this.
It's called the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, said that there would be a negligible impact on inflation this year and barely impact inflation at all next year. I mean, isn't it almost Orwellian? How can you call it Inflation Reduction Act when the nonpartisan experts say it's not going to...
So I appreciate that. I appreciate the question.
No, she doesn't. Anyway, let's look at the massive benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. First, the claim that the bill is going to lower healthcare costs and prescription drug costs. The bill spends $64 billion to expand Obamacare subsidies, originally expanded under the so-called American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion spending bill which, as you know, massively increased inflation. I mean, whatever, it's just money. But what about lower prescription drug costs? Well, phase one of this plan is for the Department of Health and Human Services to be able to negotiate prices for 10 Medicare Part D medications. The prices they negotiate will take effect in 2026. In phase two, HHS would negotiate 15 Part D drugs, and those prices would take effect in 2027. Part D medications include anti-seizure drugs, antidepressants, antipsychotics, cancer drugs, HIV/AIDS drugs, and immunosuppressants, which are taken after you get an organ transplant. So, which 25 Part D medications are going to be targeted? Couldn't tell you. And we don't know how much Americans are going to save because we don't know the price of those meds because we don't know which meds are going to be targeted. And that's the same with phase 3 and 4, where a total of 35 Part B or D medications go on the negotiation table. And these price changes will take effect in 2028 and 2029. But again, out of those 35 medications, we have no idea which ones will be negotiated. But don't worry, America, you're going to save so much money. And according to Karine Jean-Pierre, Americans are going to feel it right away, even though that's not remotely true.
Those are things specifically that the Americans going to feel right away. When it comes to lowering prescription drugs, that'll be earlier in the year next year.
Again, HHS is only negotiating prices for 10 Part D
Freaking
medications
lying
in the first
pieces
phase.
of crap.
That means that most Americans aren't going to see any savings, period, let alone see them next year. So Karine Jean-Pierre is either lying or completely stupid. Good point.
But look, this is
I just want to be clear. I don't think people should be expecting on their drug prices that's going to kick in.
well, they're going to put the first 10 pieces, the first 10 medication out there, right, to start the process so they can start negotiating the lowering cost. But the point that I'm making is that this is an investment.
That's 2026.
How does this chick have a job? Well, you know what.
That's 2026.
No.
For the first 10 and then the additional ones phasing into 2029.
The point that I'm making here is they're going to see energy costs, utility bills, that's gonna come down.
So first, Kareem Jean-Pierre claims that Americans are going to feel the effect of lower prescription costs immediately. Brianna Keeler called her out on it, and then Kareem's response is, the point I'm trying to make is about energy costs and utility bills. If Kareem Jean-Pierre was any more incompetent, her last name would be Biden. Next, Democrats claim that the bill is going to lower energy costs. Well, according to Resources for the Future, a left-leaning nonprofit slash Washington, D.C. lobbyist group that focuses on the environment and energy, claims that the average household will experience approximately $170 to $220 in savings from smaller electricity bills and reductions in the cost of goods and services over the next decade. In other words, Americans are going to save broadly
$12.
$14 to $18 a month on electricity and goods and services. How, you ask? Because the federal government is going to spend $369 billion of your tax dollars on green energy investments over the next decade. You gotta spend money to save money, I guess. Next, Democrats claim that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to reduce the federal deficit. One of the benefits of the bill is that it's going to lower the deficit by $300 billion over a 10-year period. However, this deficit reduction isn't happening anytime soon. According to an article by the EP, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, a former director of the CBO, noted that the lower deficits won't kick in until 5 years from now and won't be very large over the next decade considering the size of the economy, and stated $30 billion a year in a $21 trillion economy isn't going to move the needle. Next, make the largest investment to combat climate change in U.S. history.
Mother Earth. Mother Earth gets angry from time to time, and this legislation will help us address all of that.
Right. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, the Inflation Reduction Act contains $369 billion in spending on green energy investment. And a large portion of it goes to tax credits and rebates. Here's the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, to explain.
This first of all, immediately, people will be able to lower the fuel costs in their home. There's a 30% tax credit that you can claim in 2022 for installing energy efficient windows, heat pumps, energy efficient appliances. That is right away.
So if you want to lower your energy costs, all you gotta do is spend the money on energy efficient windows. Average house is 10 windows, $1,000 a piece. It's 10 grand, no big deal. Installation not included. Heat pump's gonna cost you like 6 grand, 10 grand, who knows? Energy efficient appliances, it's a stovetop, cooktop, fridge, washer, dryer, dishwasher, ceiling fans. Feel like I'm missing something.
And on top of that, of course, if citizens want to install solar panels on their roofs so that they can generate their own power, that's another 30% tax credit.
Right, the solar thing. That's gonna cost you another.
They're tax credits and not rebates and nothing. What pieces of shit they are.
But if you're one of the 45 million households in the United States that rents their home or apartment, doing things like installing solar panels or energy efficient windows does not apply to you.
And of course, there's the tax credits that are at the dealership for the automotive sector, for electric vehicles. So, and if you install an electric vehicle charging station in your home, you can also get a tax credit.
Want that sweet tax credit? Just spend $130,000 on an electric vehicle and install a
I'll tell you later.
$500 electric charging station. Again, it's just money, right? The Fed will print more if we need it. They know what they're doing. However, it's not that simple. Currently, there's a requirement that the battery needs to be made up of 40% of critical minerals that are sourced here in North America. But according to the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, of the 72 EV models currently available for purchase, 70% of those are automatically ineligible. And over the next few years, the sourcing requirements get stricter. In 2024, it needs to be 50%, in 2025, 60%, and so on. And the Alliance for Automotive Innovation points out that while the $7,500 credit might exist on paper, no vehicles will qualify for this purchase incentive over the next few years. This part of the bill, it's just a freaking mess. Joe Biden constantly rants about buying American, yet the lithium, cobalt, nickel, and graphite that's needed for these batteries come from other countries like China, Russia, South Africa, and Chile. And consider that 70% of the global supply of cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And according to the New York Times, the Chinese have a stake in the majority of the country's 19 cobalt producing mines. Did someone say national security risk? While we work to unlock supplies of critical minerals and ramp up battery production at home, we can't currently meet the demand for these materials on our own. That's the reality. Partnerships with friends and allies in North America and beyond will be necessary. And if you think that the same Democrats who are against fossil fuel drilling and coal mining are totally going to be okay with corporations ripping up places like Minnesota, Alaska, and California to mine for critical materials, then you're out of touch with reality. And finally, make corporations pay their fair share in taxes. First, the bill earmarks $45.6 billion to the IRS for tax enforcement activities, legal and litigation support, criminal investigation, including investigative technology, and digital asset monitoring and compliance activities. In other words, you're getting audited. Congratulations, America. And don't forget the $80 billion in funding for the IRS to hire 87,000 new agents, including special agents that are required to carry a firearm and be willing to use deadly force if necessary. Wow, that's comforting. And these armed agents are surely going to help enforce the 15% minimum tax on large corporations who make over $1 billion in income. This starts in 2023. But you know what happens when you raise taxes on corporations? They'll have less money to invest in their business, infrastructure, etc. And that leads to pay cuts, reduced hours, layoffs, and charging more for their goods and services. And when prices rise and everything costs more, well, there's a word for that: inflation. So when the prescription medication your family needs actually goes up in price, when inflation rises exponentially, when you're forced to take a second job because you can't afford food and housing, because the Fed is printing billions more to throw at Mother Earth, just remember the following when you head to the ballot box in November.
Every Republican in the Congress voted against the bill. Every single Republican.
And with that, thanks for watching, sharing, and slamming that like button. Check out these videos that you likely missed. As always, be sure that you're still subscribed to the channel.